What it do, Bless K Crew? And today we're back with another biblical study, okay? And so what we're gonna be talking about is one of my favorites, hands down, because it's very important to my testimony of God, of course, and to my life. We're gonna be talking about Esther, Queen Esther, okay? All right. So, we want to discuss in this that who Esther was, who certain biblical characters in her story was, and how it could relate possible today. Okay. So, which probably is going to lead me into doing another video about spiritual gifts, but let's focus on this first. So we want to talk about how Esther basically was a kingdom wife. We want to talk about how Mordecai was the intercessor of his people. I want to talk about King Xerxes, and he is the kingdom spouse. Okay, he's the husband. And we want to talk about Haman, the enemy of Mordecai, who was a narcissist. Okay. And we're going to read the story, and we'll do like a little bit of stops in between because this is a long reading, okay? So let's get to it. Queen Vashti deposed. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, and in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all of his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media. The princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people, from the least to the greatest, who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Okay. We are going to skip all of this because this is a lot of reading, and as much as it's important to know, I feel like we can just skip over this to make this a less time consuming read. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagatha, Zethar, and Carcass, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king. Karshina, Sethar, Admathena, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Mimikukan, the 7 nobles of Persia and Media, who had special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. According to the law, what must be done to Queen Vashti, he asked. She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then Memucan replied, in the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands, from the least to the greatest. The king and his nobles were pleased with this advice, so the king did as Memucan proposed. Okay, so we're going to skip through all the extra stuff, and we're going to make this a less time-consuming read here. Vashti was, the wife of the king, but she wasn't acting like a wife. She was not doing what the king told her to do. And a part of being a wife is that you're supposed to be submissive to your husband. You're not supposed to be giving him all this hoopla and being rebellious and whatnot, okay? So Vashti got dropped. And now we're going to go into chapter 2. Later, when King Xerxes' fury had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. And then the king's personal attendants proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Hege, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king and he followed it. Okay, so now we're going to introduce you to Esther, and we're going to skip through all of that extra stuff. It says here that now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Among those taken captive was Jehoiachin, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. Okay. Now, so Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Hege, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Okay. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day, he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. Before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. Okay. And so to end all of this and to make this shorter, she won favor in King Xerxes' eyes and she became queen. Okay. Now, and it also says that she's had so much favor from the king that he was attracted to her more than to any of the other women that was surrounding her. Okay. That's how fine she was. All right. So now we will go into Mordecai uncovers a conspiracy, because Mordecai was sent as an intercessor for King Xerxes. And this is how we're going to read this. When the virgins were assembled the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the 2 officials were impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. Okay, so check this out. We got 2 conspiracies. The security guards of the king had conspired to kill him. And because Mordecai overheard of it and told Esther, the king's life was saved, okay? Check this out. So that's how Mordecai was an intercessor, even for the king, okay? We're not done yet. So now we got Haman's plot to destroy the Jews. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, because you are not to bow before any other gods but God, okay? The real God. So, and that is a part of being a Jew. Okay, so, then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Narcissist, okay? Yet, because it's like when narcissists don't get their way, they get immature like a little child. They get upset, okay? They get enraged. Yet, having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Okay, so now he's took it to a level where he don't just want to kill Mordecai, but he wants to kill Mordecai's people too, okay? And those are God's chosen. You don't do that. Now, in the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nishan, the pur was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day in a month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury." So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the people as you please." Okay. So now, basically, a law has been issued to kill the Jews. We're going to say that just to kind of keep this less time consuming. And then once that was issued, it was brought to Mordecai's attention. So now we're going to go into chapter 4 here. Mordecai persuades Esther to help. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and the order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. And then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, assigned to her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, "All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all Esther's instructions. Okay. We're getting juicy now. It's getting juicy. We're getting a little bit closer. All right. So Esther is now being bold and courageous, but she is doing it in a godly way. And she said, if she perishes for her people. Okay. Esther's request to the king. Now watch how God uses Esther. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given you. If it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king together with Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asked. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, now, what is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Esther replied, my petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question. Okay, so in between the time of Mordecai being honored, Haman is going to be impaled or whatever the case may be. Haman has rage against Mordecai, which we all know this is going to be narcissism. I am not going to read that part because, you know, it's going to be time consuming. And we're like, I want to say 17 minutes into the video. So we're going to keep it going. Mordecai honored. That night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reigns, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's officers who guarded the doorway and who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him. His attendants answered. The king said, who is in the court now? Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him what should be done for the man the king delights to honor. Now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? Narcissism, being jealous, okay? So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on his head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Okay, so he wanted all the attention. He wanted all the fame. He wanted he wanted to be worshipped, okay? And that's what narcissists do. They take the worship from God, and that's why God is against narcissism, okay? Now, go at once, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you could not You cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. Now that's crazy. Haman's wife, the narcissist's wife, had told him, because Mordecai is a Jew, you cannot stand against him. She knew he was chosen. Okay? Check that out, right? Here it goes. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet, and as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked Queen Esther, "What is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request, for I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is he, the man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther said, "An adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was fallen on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had set it up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Impale him on it." So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. What a great story, because the narcissist got trapped in the plan that he had for God's people. Okay, God was protecting his people once again. He was protecting his people. Okay, God don't play about his chosen. All right, so now we're gonna talk about well, basically I can just tell you that, and if you want to test it, you can go read the story yourself, which I encourage you to do. On behalf of the Jews, the king had issued protection. So basically, even though he said that they were to be annihilated, he made it to where they could protect themselves and kill anybody who tried to destroy them, okay? And that's how God's people won. So, as I said, Mordecai was the intercessor of King Xerxes, okay? Not only was he the intercessor of King Xerxes, but he was the intercessor for his own people. And he was so righteous to a point he didn't want to worship a narcissist, okay? He didn't want to bow down to a narcissist. And because of his obedience to God, God honored him and protected him, okay? God showing out. He's showing out, okay? And then Esther, Queen Esther, she was so bold and courageous to risk her life, knowing that if she went before the king when she wasn't summoned, that he would put her to death. But God had favor on Esther, okay? He had favor on her because he was using her to protect her people, to protect the chosen. Think about that. You can't mess with God's chosen. Now Haman, he wanted to be worshipped. He wanted to be treated like a god. He was greedy, okay? He wanted the fame. He wanted the attention. And God set him down because he tried to come after one of his chosen. The same plan he used to try to destroy Mordecai, the intercessor, okay? He fell in. It was game over. All right? All right, so there you go. There y'all have it. This is the story of Queen Esther, okay? And this happens in real life too. You know, God will send someone to warn you of somebody conspiring against you. Through a dream, maybe, you know. Two chosen ones will link up, you know. It happens all the time. Like, and you know, God say a warning comes before destruction. So, you know, just make sure that you are not operating as a narcissist, or, you know, being a narcissist or dating a narcissist, okay? Because clearly that they have been here since the beginning of time, since before I was ever born, okay? And yeah, the story of Queen Esther, okay? All right, bold and courageous for God. All right, okay. If y'all liked this video, like, comment, share, and subscribe with friends and family. Until next time, bless K Crow. Stay blessed.